Tonight, we start with a little background on the filibuster. A quick definition. It's a tactic used to prolong or delay movement on a measure, usually by talking. The Senate has employed the filibuster since the late 19th century. It became a favorite gambit among Southern senators, hoping to cling to their white supremacist interest. I'll give context to that in a second. It also might surprise you to know that the filibuster was created by accident. In 1805, then Vice President Aaron Burr decided the Senate rules were messy and needed to be cleaned up. He suggested getting rid of what was called the previous question motion, or a motion to close the debate. But that was the rule that stopped a senator from talking. So by eliminating it, they inadvertently set the stage for senators to be able to just jabber on and on, potentially blocking a bill from being voted on. It took 35 years for the Senate to implement what became known as the filibuster. But since 1841, this rule blatantly targeted black people. It was used primarily to protect slavery, to bar anti-lynching legislation, to stand in the way of civil rights bills, and these most recent efforts to thwart voting rights laws. Here to talk about how this Jim Crow relic continues to impede progress on a host of social, racial, and economic justice issues is Taifa Smith Butler, the president of Demos, a think tank dedicated to a just, inclusive, and multiracial democracy. Taifa, welcome back to Amplified. I'm so excited to get to nerd out with you a bit on this process that, frankly, most people probably don't even understand and never heard of until late. The Senate filibuster has been referred to as a Jim Crow relic. Last spring, President Biden even went on the record agreeing with President Obama's description of it as such. Explain to our viewers what people mean when they say that this Senate rule stems from Jim Crow.
Thank you so much, Aisha, for having me. Yes, for all the people today who want to rebrand what the Jim Crow filibuster is, we must give the history lesson, which you did at the top of the show. This was used in late 19th century, early 19th century to really thwart the efforts to fight against slavery. Anti-poll taxes. We have seen this in history show up, particularly with Southern lawmakers who wanted to hold to slavery. And so they used this tool to block anti-slavery legislation. They used this tool early in the 1940s to block anti-poll tax legislation, even when there has been a majority of Americans who supported anti-slavery and anti-poll tax legislation. And everybody remembers, Senator Strom Thurmond, who infamously did the longest talking filibuster in 1957 to fight against the Civil Rights Act of 1957. So it has historically been used against civil rights, against human rights in our country, as well as other types of economic justice policies that the Senate has tried to pass.
Yeah, I really want to dig into this because I keep hearing, I think it was just yesterday, Mitch McConnell claiming that, Joe Biden is offensive and everything he's saying about voting rights is offensive and that the filibuster isn't racist. And I mean, just the Republican hypocrisy and real ignorance around the history. I just want to make sure that we set the record straight for folks and talk about, if you could, how the procedure has really been about implementing or, cementing what I like to call white minority rule, because surely
Absolutely.
White people have been in power and been in control, right? But at the end of the day, they mad right now because their minority is really clear, right? Like they're not going to be the majority of this country. But talk to us about the idea of white minority rule or even minority rule and how this has gummed up the Senate over time.
Thank you. Well, you think about democracy, right? Anybody who's run for election, you think about majority rule, 50% plus one. Is the majority. And that has won elections historically in this country. It is what state legislatures are doing right now to pass voter suppression legislation, 50% plus one. a simple majority. And what this rule does, in fact, is say that we want 60 senators to vote on legislation, not 50 plus one. And this is, like you said, a minority power, what we call minority veto power. It solidifies the minority party's ability to stop any legislation that they do not like. And as much as historically it's been used through a talking filibuster, where they had to actually talk to prevent the calling of the question of, do we want to vote for this bill? Now it's just a threat. They don't have to talk all night like they had to or did in the past. Now they invoke this rule to say there aren't 60% of the votes, and so we don't need to bring this question to the floor to make us go on record about this legislation. And for us who believe fundamentally in the right to vote, for those of us who believe in an inclusive, multiracial, just a democracy, we need a simple majority for the majority to be able to say what we want to do, what rules we want to pass. And this relic of Jim Crow, which right now is being branded as an effort to improve bipartisanship, no, it's been an effort to keep the minority in power.
And, I got to say, Demos works so much on how we achieve structural change to these antiquated processes, policies, and systems that we use around our democracy that really have nothing to do other than, at this point, they're relics of keeping white landowners in power ultimately. So when we talk about minority rule, y'all, I just want to just really emphasize, the minority rule of the days that Taifa was just talking about really were slaveholders who wanted to hold down their institution of slavery because that's how they enriched themselves, right? So you ended up with a system, we got a United States Senate now, where, as we're seeing play out, a handful of senators who represent a tiny fraction of the total population of this country have complete outsized impact in the future direction of this country. That's what we mean by minority rule. So why is it that Joe Manchin from West Virginia, who, God bless his constituents and the people of West Virginia, he represents a tiny amount of people, why he's holding up the entire nation is exactly what we're talking about. We're talking about the problem of minority rule. I think that the filibuster really just, kind of reinforces this for us. And, I want to come back to the idea, though, that the filibuster, as the Republicans would try to now tell you, has nothing to do with race. I came across a Washington Post article that actually did a deep dive into the history of filibusters. Of the 40 that happened between 1837 and 1917 that the writers examined, 10 of them targeted racial issues. That's 25%. And between 1917 and 1994, of the 30 filibusters that they looked at, half of them targeted civil rights. So talk to us a little bit more. I know you kind of laid out some of the things that were done or the things that were blocked, but talk to us a little bit more about the specific bills that white senators, frankly, managed to block that would have otherwise helped Black Americans. And by block, meaning things that didn't even come up for a vote because they were able to have the filibuster to just table it. And we didn't even get to address it at all.
Well, so let's bring this to present day when we think about the rights and the opportunities that we want to see for Black and brown communities across this country, voting rights being number one. But DC statehood, for years, we've been talking about taxation without representation for our DC citizens, and majority of them being people of color, Black folks living in the district. So the House passed a bill in 2020 to give DC statehood. The Senate blocked by filibuster. When we talked about gun reform, which overwhelmingly impacts Black communities, 10 times gun homicides in Black communities compared to others, we have tried to pass gun reform in this country, again, blocked by the filibuster. When we talk about healthcare reform and how we've addressed and tried to continue to improve Medicaid expansion and other types of ways that we can improve our healthcare infrastructure in this country, again, blocked by the filibuster. Criminal justice reform, gender wage wealth gap, just the opportunity for us to increase our minimum wage in this country. Again, since 2009, we've had the same federal minimum wage. There is not political will in the Senate to increase that. And again, that would by and large impact Black and brown communities and low wealth, low wage workers in this country, blocked by the filibuster. And let's not talk about immigration reform. And we've been fighting nearly 20 years to get the DREAM Act passed in this country, overwhelming public support for these dreamers to be able to have citizenship. And again, 2 million people are waiting, but this relic of Jim Crow continues to prevent their ability to live as citizens in this country. You can make no mistake. So the debate right
now is whether to actually change the thing. Jones, this is what everyone's talking about. Change the rules, change the rules. Just this week, President Biden also called for some changes. Talk to us about how this is not a novel idea to change the rules. Can they be changed? What happens if they're changed? Give us a sense of that in the next minute.
Absolutely. They can change them whenever they want to. It is a rule. It is not constitutional. Rules are made to hold power, and they can, just like I heard earlier today in a conversation, Sinema was willing 35 days ago to dispense with the filibuster rule to pass other legislation, the debt ceiling, for example. So when there is political will and there's political courage to do it, they can. And for me, if they believe in democracy and want to protect it, you can't say out of one side of your mouths, we believe in these voting rights bills, and then hold on to a relic of Jim Crow that thwarts our democracy. You can't do it.
Nope. Don't go anywhere, because coming up, we are actually going to continue our conversation with Taifa Smith Butler of Demos about where the efforts to change the filibuster rules actually stand in the Senate. So keep it right here. Welcome back to Amplified. The entrenchment of white minority rule by using the filibuster runs deep in our country's history. But most Democrats in our Democratic majority Senate are trying to change this. Majority Leader Chuck Schumer has been looking for a path, aka votes, through which the Senate rules could be revised to a simple majority vote, making it possible then to pass voting rights legislation that has been held in the upper chamber since last year. Taifa Smith Butler, president of Demos, is still with me, and she's going to help us get to the bottom of the filibuster messery and understand what might be able to be done. So, Taifa, let's jump to Schumer's strategy. Schumer is scrounging to make this happen. And CNN's Manu Raju tweeted that Schumer sent a memo to Democrats outlining the process through which he's going to bring the rule change up for a vote. His tweet reads, "The House will act first. The chamber will send over a piece of legislation that includes both the Freedom to Vote Act and John Lewis Voting Rights Act. House rules may act tonight." Do you think that, one, this is really going to happen? Two, how long is that whole process going to take? And just break this down for us, because I think people might be confused about this, like, back and forth with the House and the Senate.
Oh, yes, we all are. I mean, this is the way the sausage is made in D.C. So what we understand right now is, as you all know, the House had already passed the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act and the Freedom to Vote Act. But now this new measure that they put together this week and passed just today merges the two bills together. So now it's the Freedom to Vote John R. Lewis Act. And now it has an opportunity, from what I understand as these things are playing out, to move over to the Senate and be seen and heard with a vote, or at least a debate. That they now have an opportunity to debate the bill on its merits and go on record whether or not they are for the right and the freedom to vote in this country. And this would not, they wouldn't have to actually call the question around the filibuster right now. So this puts them, I think, antsy. As we've all been watching Twitter today, there is a nervousness and a concern, obviously, from these senators who will now have to debate the merits of these two bills and to say that they are against the freedom to vote in this country.
And so here's the thing. We talk a lot about the Republicans because they're just like a blockade, right? Like they're not going to do anything that Biden wants to do. We get that, whatever, forget them. People like me, particularly, but a lot of people, have also grown to hate on Manchinima, Senators Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema, that are holding all this up. But here's the thing. There are other Democrats who are on the fence, who are essentially hiding behind the fact that Sinema and Manchin don't mind taking the blows. Senators John Tester of Montana, for example, Chris Coons of Delaware, Jeanne Shaheen of New Hampshire, they all come to mind because it seems to me like they're trying to take the easy way out from having to actually make a tough choice on the filibuster, and they haven't really been saying a whole lot. So could you give us a sense of what you might have heard about what's happening on the Hill and where the Democratic caucus is with regards to getting rid of the filibuster?
That's a great question. And I think that the larger issue is people want this in their back pocket for when they are not in power, right? And so it's if they were to make these decisions today, if in fact we lose or they lose the midterms, nonpartisan organization, if the Democrats lose the midterms in November, then they would like to probably exercise that right. But what I want to help remind folks, because apparently there's some political amnesia here, is that that filibuster when the Republicans were in power just a few years ago did what we all wanted them not to do, and that was get rid of the filibuster so that they could take the Supreme Court nominees and move forward, right? And so that was something that we believed was very important for us to have a debate and a conversation about who was going to be these new nominees that the Trump administration was putting forward. And so right now, for our Democratic leadership to have forgotten how quickly that happened is right now disconcerting for me when you have a moment in this country where democracy is threatened, it is on fire. 19 states, 34 bills have passed to undermine our access to the ballot. And for senators, Democratic and GOP, to sit back and say, we believe more importantly in this anti-democratic rule than to put forward and restore our Voting Rights Act, right? Or to ensure that people have unabridged access to the ballot. So that's the thing that we have to make them call the question and debate these bills on the floor so we can hear where they're coming from. And from what I understand right now, as at the top of the hour, the president is speaking with those two senators right now. But as the president said in Atlanta just a few days ago, there were 16 other GOP senators who supported the Voting Rights Act in 2006. Where are they?
Yep. And, you know, the reality is that we know where they are. They are in the pocket of Donald Trump somewhere. We ain't going to get them back and, like, forget about them. I am most concerned about the Democrats because, you know, it seems like we're always giving them a pass, right? It seems to me we're always giving them a pass. But since you brought it up, I do want to play devil's advocate for a moment because I want you to explain to folks, you know, there is a consequence to eliminating the filibuster. Now, we need to decide as a nation whether it's worth it, but you just brought up what the Republicans did. Mitch McConnell went, quote unquote, nuclear, as they call it, and got rid of the filibuster for all appointments. So essentially, they could ram through everybody that Donald Trump wanted to appoint to any position, namely the courts and the Supreme Court, that they're able to now appoint people with a simple majority. That is how Donald Trump got 3 people on the Supreme Court, and ultimately the Republicans have stacked the courts up and down. So that's problematic, right? That they were able to do that. And, you know, to be fair, Democrats are like, oh my God, if we get rid of the filibuster, well, we're going to lose Roe versus Wade, and it's going to be really ugly and nasty. So I want you to just comment on that and what might be some stopgap to not, you know, lose by trying to win.
Well, and it's a case by case. From what I understand, Aisha, is that they can elect to suspend the filibuster to pass these two bills. The filibuster will still be in place from what I understand. But again, if these two bills are as important as we all believe they are, and these two Democratic senators who are the holdouts say they believe in voting rights legislation, then they would elect to allow this rule to be suspended so that that vote can be called to the floor and that they can vote for voting rights. So it's not a a forever endeavor. It's a one time to move these bills forward, much like they did with the debt ceiling, much like they did with some of the other bills. If they want it bad enough, if there's political will and political courage to get it done, they can.
I like to think of, and challenge me here, or I should say, change the language if I'm miscategorizing you, but I like to think about Demos as having its finger on the pulse of communities on the ground and really being a think tank of organizers. And I would like to get your sense of what people really care about. Because I'm just curious if people really care about the filibuster at all. Last year, there was a series of polls that were taken of registered voters and where they actually stand on the filibuster. One survey found that 27% favored eliminating the filibuster, 29% opposed getting rid of it, and nearly 40% had no opinion, which to me says they don't really care. Tell us, do voters, think about midterm voters, actually care about the filibuster, or is this a lot of inside baseball?
It's a lot of inside baseball. I mean, again, I think the no opinion folks in that poll probably don't even know what it is and how it's, what kind of rule, how it's invoked, and how it works, right? I think what people care about by and large is being able to show up at the polls and believe that their vote counts and that it matters. And right now we have an instance now where we are undermining our democracy by limiting access to the ballot via all of these rules, limiting more early vote days, voter IDs, ensuring that we can't provide water and food for folks who wait in lines for 8 to 9 hours like in Atlanta. So there are these things that people are more concerned about. And quite honestly, as we've just seen these redistricting maps that have been drawn all across this country that have been politically gerrymandered, people are caring, don't believe they have the representation that they need, right? Because of the way these lines are drawn. It is solidifying power for those who are writing the rules, and it is unfair. And this is why we need federal oversight and some accountability to ensure that we can protect our democracy. That's what people care about.
Taifa Smith Butler, Taifa, president of Demos, thank you for breaking down all of these details on the filibuster for us tonight. We're going to continue to watch and appreciate you being here. Thank you.